I remember, first of all, reading that script and thinking, wow, I can't believe that this happens in the world and that this really happened, and feeling like I really wanted to be a part of it. And going in and auditioning for the casting director. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and I bought a cowboy hat and put my husband at the time's clothes on and put my hair up in the hat and was just scratching the surface of how I wanted to play the character. And um, the casting directors knew who I was. Yet when I got there, they were looking at their clipboard and kind of looking at me, and they just went, "Hillary?" And yep. And they said, "Oh, okay, great." And I went up and I remember auditioning. The tape went to Kimberly Pierce in New York, and they said she'd like to meet you, but you have to fly yourself here. And I didn't have a lot of money, and my manager said, "No, they should fly you." And my agent said, "Get your ass on that plane." And so I bought my ticket. I went to New York. I stayed at a friend's place. And I remember auditioning. I remember Kimberly having me not only read what I had prepared, but practically the whole script. Um, and after the audition, I remember feeling really liberated. And I felt liberated not because I felt like I had done a wonderful job or that I was going to get the movie, but that I had fought for myself. And that I put myself on a plane and I went there and I fought for something that I really wanted. And I remember, I felt wonderful. It was a great feeling to have done that for myself and to not be afraid to just get in there and give it all. I went into the Astor Place barbershop in New York City. It's not there anymore. And my hair was longer than it is now. And I asked them to please cut my hair off, and they wouldn't do it. They kept saying, "Is this for a student film? Are you sure you want to cut your hair off? What are you doing? What are you doing?" And the first person wouldn't do it. Finally, we got someone who would do it. And it was the probably the most physical part of the kind of transformation. And afterwards, I had someone meet me at a coffee shop across the way, and I remember standing there, and I was in the clothes that I had auditioned in, and they were looking right past me. They would look at me and like look right past me, and I thought, "Wow, this is wonderful. This is the first step in this preparation." And then after that, for 4 weeks, I would just every single day go out and try and pass as a boy, which is what Brandon Tina had done. What I knew that when I got to the set, that people would treat me like the role because they were saying the lines and that's what they were supposed to be doing. But I really wanted to know what mannerisms worked and what didn't. What gave me up. How was I seen as a girl when I was trying to pass as a boy? Was it a voice inflection? Was it the way I was carrying myself? Was it the way I was looking? So that was a really important part of my preparation. And it was also an interesting. I learned a lot about life. It was in these roles that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. I really learned a lot about things that I wouldn't have any idea really about except from what I've read. But I get to live it in such a deep, profound way. I get to see what it's like for a transgendered person or a person with a sexual identity crisis or a lesbian or a gay person, and really the daily harassment that you can get. I gotta live that. I knew that I could go back to being this person that people could define, and that I could step out of that. But for the people who can't, and that's their life, it's a scary place to be, to feel not understood, and when people can't define you, how it scares them and how their own weakness comes out because they don't know how to be. Tina Brandon was actually born in the same hospital I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska, 2 years before me. So there's that interesting coincidence. And, grew up with her sister and her mother, and at one point in her life said that, she started dressing more masculine. And, to this day, I try not to define who this person was, because she or he, however you look at it, was never said, look, I'm a lesbian, and it wasn't okay to be a lesbian in Nebraska, and so I started passing as a boy, or I want to have a sex change. I don't feel like I'm a girl. The only thing that we know that Tina Brandon said was, I have a sexual identity crisis. That's the only thing we have on tape when she was interviewed by a cop. And so that was an important part of my job, I felt, was to not define her, but just to try and be as honest to who she was as we could. So what I do know is that this person had a sexual identity crisis, chose to, be with women, and all he wanted to do was find love and give love. She was quoted as saying, I have a lot of love to give, and I want to give it. And that's something that I could relate to. That was the part that I could relate to. In essence, this was it was a love story about finding yourself and becoming yourself, and that journey getting cut short. Very the pain of it, and what's hard to understand is how the people who were his friends ended up, brutally raping her and then killing her. And again, it was because of whatever came up in their minds when they found out this person was really a girl. Why? Why? What came up for them? Why was it so threatening? That's occurring still. That's not something that happened and it's done and we all moved on and we all grew from it and were enlightened. It's still happening in the world today, every day. I was asked by the Hetrick Martin Institute to give their yearly award out right after I had finished filming, and the movie hadn't even come out yet. And I went and I presented this award, which is an award that is given to people who have done great things in the gay, lesbian, transgendered community to either raise awareness or, funds, or actors who have played roles and brought just an enlightenment to the community. And that's when I learned about it. And I was asked to be the spokesperson. So I've been the spokesperson now, I guess, for 7 years. Yeah. And worked closely with the kids there. There's an accredited high school, the Harvey Milk School. I worked closely with the school's chancellor in New York City to help expand the school, make it bigger. There's counseling services for the kids and their families. A lot of these kids have been either ostracized from schools or their families and have lived on the street, turned to prostitution, myriad things. So it's wonderful to be their spokesperson and be able to help raise money to give them a safe environment in which to learn and grow and realize their dreams. There are, I would say, 1 in 50 scripts that you read only that blow your mind, that are riveting and get under your skin in a really profound way. Million Dollar Baby was one of them. It was sent to me by the producers at Lakeshore, who I'd done The Gift with, and I knew nothing about it. I just knew the title, and I thought, I didn't know if it was about a prostitute, or I had no idea what it was about. Million Dollar Baby was the name. I just thought, no idea. And I sat down and I read it, and it was such a page turner, and it moved me so much. I think probably because it was, if I had to say, of all the characters I've played, it was the one that was the most similar to me in my story. And I was just, it was like it was in my marrow. It was visceral. I just sat there and looked at it, and I was so moved, and I just knew that I had to be a part of it. And then I got to meet with Clint Eastwood, and at the time I weighed 108 pounds. I have small bones. I'm little, and I just thought, oh, I hope he sees me as a boxer. And they'd sent me the script, yet Clint needed to approve me. He could have anyone he wanted. And I went in, I sat down with him, and he knew. I mean, people to this day say, how did you get it? How did it work out? And he says that he knew my work ethic and he knew of my sports background. And by the end of our meeting, he looked at me and he said, well, you better start training. So I started. I went back to New York, and the following week I started my training. I have so much respect for him, and I almost get really emotional because he's an anomaly. He has so much confidence, like you said, but he has no ego. He trusts his instincts. Yes, at the time when I met him, he was 74, so he's been doing it for so long. Yet there are a lot of people who've been doing it that long and still don't really trust their instinct. But the one thing that I learned from Clint, of the many things I learned from Clint, is to always trust your instinct and don't think about it too much. Clint is well known for only doing 1 to 2 takes. He says that because he feels like he gets the people who are right for the role and the job, his whole crew as well, and he allows them to do it. He says he just gets out of the way, and he believes that people know when they're working on all 8 cylinders, and that your first instinct is the right instinct if you've done your homework. Our longest day was 12 hours, and that was with a company move. Just to give you an understanding of how amazing that is, I would say a normal workday for me is 15 to 18 hours. That's normal, and you don't think twice about that. He never questioned it. Some people would ask questions, and he'd say, "You're thinking too much. We got it." It's wonderful instincts. It's a talent, but it's also a confidence in an understanding of film. Time is money, especially in the film business. And we came in under budget, under schedule, and it's very rare when that happens. And it's a boxing movie, where anything could have happened, and we could have gone over because of the fights and the fight scenes. But that's Clint. And you hear it over and over and over from everyone who's worked with him that's Clint. At every job that I get an opportunity to learn more about myself and grow as a human being. And this was hands down the most challenging thing I've ever asked myself to do physically. Like I said, I started at 108, and I say that because I ended up getting to 129. And I put on 19 pounds of muscle, and it was with the help of some wonderful people who, again, believed in me. I trained for 5 hours a day, 2.5 hours in boxing, and then it was like between 4 and 5 hours a day, 2.5 hours of boxing every day, 6 days a week, and an hour and a half of weight training to 2 hours. And I needed to eat 210 grams of protein a day, and your body can't assimilate a lot of protein, so I had to eat every hour and a half. And I was a vegetarian. I ate fish at that time, but I didn't eat red meat or anything that could help me. So a lot of my diet was egg whites. I had to eat 60 egg whites in a day. And I don't know if you've ever even tried to eat 5 egg whites. It's not, it's fine and everything, but I just couldn't eat that many, so I would just drink them. I would drink flax oil, I would drink protein shakes, but I also I needed a lot of sleep at night because my body was going through this change, but I couldn't go to sleep without waking up and eating. So I would wake up and I would drink my protein shakes. I was actually going for 10 pounds. I was going for 10 pounds of muscle was my goal. And when I got to that weight, I just didn't feel like it was enough. I personally felt, no one was saying you need more or less. It didn't look right yet to me to make this believable. Lucia Riker, was the wonderful Lucia Riker, was who I was boxing at the end of the movie, and she fights at 148. I'm trying to think. No, she fights at 158, but she came down to 148 for the film to help balance it out. And I just thought, right now, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to be believable. So I just continued on that regimen and eventually put on the extra muscle. Yeah, it was. I would definitely say that was that preparation for me was so important in who I am today, because if I woke up in the morning, I ached everywhere. There wasn't everything. I just thought, I'm so tired right now, and I can't go to I can't train today. I can't. And with that attitude, I wasn't growing. With that attitude, I was staying where I was. And I realized that the biggest obstacle was my mind, was the biggest obstacle. And if I could get out of the way of myself, I would grow. So every time I had that attitude, I changed it. And I'd say, yes, you can. Today, you can. And take it one day at a time. And today, I'm going to get up. And I'm not going to think about the other 6 days of this week. I'm going to get up right now, and I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to learn about my boxing, and I'm going to be in the moment. And, in anything, you hit a wall, and then you'd have to break through it. And I just had to get out of my own way. To drop weight and to lose that muscle, you just virtually stop lifting, But muscle memory is as everyone says, is really a powerful thing. And if I started lifting again, I'm sure that I could put it right back on. But it's not how I choose to look. And I'm a big proponent for exercise. I feel like I don't exercise to look a certain way. I exercise for the mind-body connection. I feel like it's a very important part of my life, for my stress, for my overall well-being. I have to have it in my life, and it makes me feel great. It's helped me through a lot of difficult times in my life. I run, I do Pilates, I swim, I bike. I'm a big outdoor person. I love the outdoors, so anytime I can run or hike, I do that. I was not a runner at any point in my life, but because boxing was the most difficult thing I have ever done, physically, it got my heart beating in a way that I didn't know my heart could beat, and I really longed for my heart to beat like that again. And running was really one of the things that did that for me. So I took up running. I got a blister the size of my palm on my right foot from pivoting, and it was really swollen, and I couldn't train or walk on it, so I popped it myself, and it got infected. And it turned into a staph infection, which I actually didn't know much about. All I knew is that I couldn't walk on my foot, and I was in an extraordinary amount of pain. And someone said to me, I've had staph, and that might be staph. Just keep watching it. Well, it didn't take that long. I went to bed one night, and I woke up, and I had a streak up my leg. And they said, oh, you better get in. That's not a good thing. Staph is very dangerous. And when I got to my doctor's, he said, put your foot down, stand up, and not on it, but just stand up and put your foot down. I'll be right back. He came back in, and he said, this is very serious. You have to stop boxing immediately, and you're going to stay right here. He drew a line on my leg so it wouldn't go above that, because if that gets to your heart, you die. So if that infection makes it up to your heart, that's it. So obviously, it was devastating news to me that I wasn't going to be able to box, and I only had this limited amount of time. So he said, I can't express to you. I said, I need to box. 2 days, will be over in 2 days. And he said, listen to me. You have to stop. This is life-threatening. You have to stop. Just stop. Get your infection, make it, until it's gone, and then you can go training again. So I took most of the advice when I felt like the line was gone and it wasn't red anymore. I couldn't box still because I couldn't pivot on it, but I was still doing weight training. My trainer would piggyback me to the gym, and I'd do everything I could where I wasn't standing on it. I was doing all my upper body and my sit-ups, and then he'd piggyback me back to my place. I didn't tell anybody because I just didn't want it to hold anything up, and I don't know, I just didn't say anything. I didn't want people to stop the process. Felt like I was in a groove, and something that I was dealing with, and I didn't need to worry anybody. I was wondering how it was gonna be. I thought, wow, what a challenging role for an actor and a challenging job for a director. How do you do both? And that's to me why I do feel like it was Clint's best performance. Because at that age, he was still pulling cards out of his sleeve, doing things that you'd never seen him do before. He was emotional in a way that I feel like we'd never seen him. And at the same time, being at the helm of this movie, how he did it all, I have no idea. And to me, he's worthy of every accolade because of it. Clint being this person that I have admired my whole life, and certainly my whole career, it really mirrored our characters' relationships. I'm living this dream. I want this role. I want to work with Clint Eastwood. Maggie has this dream. She needs the help of this person to help get her there. And it was very, very funny how, life can imitate art or vice versa. It was very, very similar to the relationship that we have and the relationship that the characters have. I think more than anything, it was just also a reminder of all those days when I complained about getting up to use my body, of the position I could have been in or anyone can be in, where all of a sudden there's a big shift and you're not able to use your body, and how easily we take our health for granted is what it did for me. Every time I got to get up out of that bed and realize that I hadn't broken my neck and I could still utilize my body, was also just a wonderful reminder to me to not take my health for granted, and to use it. Again, another reason why I use it, why I use my body, and I try and treat it with respect because I'm thankful. It's amazing to me that I have one, and to hear, two. I it's a I don't know if it will ever quite hit me that it has really happened. It's such a big honor to receive, and I still feel like I'm this girl from this trailer park who had a dream, and I have, I've been given the highest honor for people who I've watched all my life, who inspire me and move me, and it's something that is quite amazing and leaves me really speechless. As a child, I felt like an outsider, and that's not, you know, just specific to me. I think everyone's felt like that at one point or another in their life. But for me, I would read books and watch movies, and in that way, I would feel understood. I felt like characters were going through something I was going through, or that would make me feel, oh, there's someone in the world that is understanding, and they almost became like they were my friends. And when I realized that it was something I could do with my life, that I could become an actor and tell these stories, that I could continue to learn about myself in a deeper way, that I could entertain at the same time and hopefully give that to another child or person, and just continue to learn about the human experience. It was really my draw to become an actor, and how I describe what movies are. To Kill a Mockingbird, I would say is still my favorite book, and was one of the most moving books I remember reading as a child. I loved it. Scout, this little girl who felt like she was going through so many similarities that I was going through. It was just a wonderful reminder that I wasn't alone, really, in a way. And the movies that I watched, the first few movies I watched that I really remembered being important to me were The Wizard of Oz, The Miracle Worker, and The Elephant Man. And I remember at a really young age, I think I was maybe 7 when I watched The Wizard of Oz, thinking, wow, there are these people who want to go and get a heart and a brain, and they go to this man behind the curtain only to realize that that man isn't really there, and they have to find it within themselves. And I feel like I grew up really quickly, and those things helped me realize things about myself that I'd have to look within. And but my mom also gave me that gift. My mom was a wonderful, wonderful person in my life, and still is a wonderful person in my life. My mom gave me the most important gift that I will ever have been given, which is the gift of believing in myself. She believed in me, and she continued to tell me my whole life, you can do anything you want as long as you work hard enough. You'll hit a lot of walls, and there'll be a lot of obstacles, but you just keep persevering, and you'll make it. My dad was in the military, and they did most of their moving before I was born. I was, yes, born in Lincoln, Nebraska, and when I was 3, my dad got moved to Spokane, Washington, and we drove there. I remember that drive. We drove there and lived there for about 4 years, and then we moved to Bellingham, Washington, and then that was the extent of our moving while my father was in the military. I was from a lower-income family. I lived in trailer parks, and to me that didn't mean anything because I was a kid, and it has no meaning. I had a roof over my head, and I had food, and I had love, and it was not a big deal. But it was at that young age that I learned classism because of my friends, not my friends, but my friends' parents, who wouldn't allow their kids to play with me like I was somehow contagious. And they would all become poor or something. It was looking back now as well, I realize how narrow-minded, and that led me to feel like an outsider, like I didn't belong. And it's, something that, I look at kids now, and you just realize we're all the same, and what a terrible thing to do to any child, But it helped make me who I am, and I don't have any bitterness or anger. School was, the place that I would go where the kids whose parents didn't want them to play with me, it was just an extension of that. Unfortunately, it was a place where I didn't necessarily feel like I belonged. I had a couple of wonderful teachers. My 5th grade teacher was also a big influence in my career because he had us write a skit in front of the class and perform it in front of the class. And in that moment, now I realize I found what we call our calling. And at the time, I had no idea, but I knew that something came alive inside of me and that I was doing something that I loved tremendously. I remember writing it and enjoying that process, and then getting up and just feeling like I came alive when I was doing that. And he was so kind. He wrote to my mom and said, oh, she really has a talent for this. She really enjoyed it. I think you should really support this. And I've gone back to visit him and speak to his classes, and I'm really thankful for his support. And I think he was also a teacher that saw what was going on and really, really cared. It's amazing when there's teachers like that who really reach out and try and understand their kids in the class. It certainly made me feel like I belonged. He said, this is great to have you come back. Thank you very much. And it's people like that in my life that I'm really grateful for. We all have those handful of people that believed in us, and I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today without those people. So I'm really grateful, and I like to let them know that. He said, I think you should try out for the school play, and it happened to be Jungle Book. And I went in and I auditioned for Bagheera. I wanted to play Bagheera, and I was asked to play Mowgli. And I thought, a boy? And I said, I'm gonna have to go think about that. And I came back, I said, yes, I'll do it. So that was my first play. That is on videotape. It's very funny to watch. I remember it gave me focus. It gave me something to just really put everything into. And I remember learning the lines. I remember thinking, am I going to remember all these lines? I remember rehearsing. I remember the joy of losing myself in the rehearsal process at that age, of 9 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember the collaboration and how fun it is to figure out what you're doing together. I told my mom at that young age, I want to be an actor. And at that point, she was like, oh, that's great. But at the time I was also a swimmer. I started swimming at a very young age. I was a gymnast. I loved sports. I played basketball, depending on what season it was, but I always swam. I ended up going to the Junior Olympics. So I had a lot going on in my life. And my mom said, well, if you want to start doing plays, that's great. We'll go audition. And she was very supportive of that. She wanted to make sure, obviously, that it was something I really wanted to do before we made any big steps. And so, yes, I started doing theater in my local repertory theater in Bellingham. My mom started to come to a crossroads in her life where things were changing up. My father and her separated. Then I hit 15, and I was still doing school plays. My mom realized that it was something I wanted to do with my life. And about the middle of my 15th year, she said, well, if you really want to do this, we should go down to Hollywood and pursue this in a real way. And, I'm at a place where I can do that now. And with $75 and a gas credit card, we got into our car with all of the stuff we could put in there and drove down to Los Angeles. My mom will say to this day, how did you get the way you are? How do you not worry? Where your work ethic, your optimism? And I tell her, Mom, you took it all on. You worried. You were. She hid it well. She never showed me how worried she was. When we first got down to Los Angeles, we were living out of our car, which was in the press and something I talk about a lot, just until we could find a place or my mom could get a job. And to her, that was obviously something that she worried about. But for me, it was a great adventure. I didn't look at it as something that was a negative, or again, it was like the trailer. I was a kid. It was all an adventure to me. It was life. It was not something that I thought as a negative in any way, shape, or form. I was in Hollywood about to pursue my dream. I was going down there to try and live what I love. So it was a wonderful, wonderful adventure. My mom, we found a friend who was selling their home, and so their house was empty during the day, and we spent a little bit of our rations and bought some air mattresses, and we blew them up and would sleep on them at night in this house, and then fold them up and leave during the day so they could try and sell their house. So that's where we lived for a little while. I'm a very driven person, but I think more than drive, I would say I'm a very passionate person, because I think drive can only get you so far. Without passion behind it, and a sense of destination, you're just kind of wandering around aimlessly. You can have drive and push yourself, but if you don't know really what you're pushing yourself towards and have a real sense of what it is you want to do, it can be frustrating. I remember watching my mom. She had a roll of quarters, and she would just call agents. My daughter is really great. She's really talented. You should meet her. They'd say, great, we'll send a resume in and a picture. My, of course, didn't have either of those. And finally, my mom found somebody who said, okay, well, yeah, we're meeting people, Wednesday, coming at 2. And I went in, and they had me read a McDonald's commercial. And I didn't know what was expected of me when I went in, but I remember reading it. I remember it like it was yesterday. And the woman's name was Bonnie Leidke, and she said, great, that was great. I'd love to be your agent. And I remember going out. My mom was sitting in the waiting room, nervous. And I said, Mom, I have an agent. And Bonnie was my agent up until I became an adult, and she worked with, children. So she was my agent for, I guess, 5 years. I didn't have an Ivy League education. I didn't have a headshot. I didn't have training, formal acting training. I just had my mom who believed in me and who instilled a wonderful work ethic and belief. So I'm really grateful for that. In the years between now and then, I've recognized the importance of learning my craft and wanting to go deeper and never wanting to rest on my laurels and what I've achieved. And I believe that learning is one of the most important things in life. And I take classes when I can, not only in acting, but any other thing that I can. I'm learning Italian, I read, anything that has to do with life is only going to help me as an actor. So any way that I can travel and learn more, I take that when I can. I got a couple of lines on a sitcom. Growing Pains, I think the first time I was on Growing Pains, I I pulled a bunny out of a hat and said, "Ta-da!" And that got me my SAG card. And then I was on Evening Shade, and then they just kept bringing me back. I had recurring characters on sitcoms. My mother got a job, and we rented a room from a single mother, and we lived with her for I think a year, maybe a little more than a year, until I started working too, and my mom and I rented a house together. I was cast on Beverly Hills 90210 when it was in its 8th season and no one watched it anymore. Yet I was still very grateful for the job. I never, ever knocked an opportunity to learn my craft. And I did a handful. Every single year I do a pilot. A pilot is something that you get that they make, and they only pick up maybe 4 of them. They probably make 50 of them. So every year I was thankful enough to get a pilot. Not all of them obviously got picked up. But then I got on 90210, and I was very grateful for the opportunity to continue to learn, even though it was something that was kind of old news. I signed a 2-year contract, which is a very big deal. As a working actor, you have that security. It's not. I would say security is not the number one thing that most actors have, because you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So having a 2-year contract was actually wonderful. Gave me the opportunity, like I said, to continue to grow and learn. And about maybe 14 episodes into the first year, I was fired. And I remember going in and saying, "This isn't really working. It's just, it's not working." And I was devastated. I went home and I thought, I'm not good enough for 90210 in the 8th season. What does that mean what does that say about me? And it's actually one of those great lessons in trusting fate, because about maybe 4 months later, I got Boys Don't Cry, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not been fired. Karate Kid, I was 18 years old when I was cast. It wasn't my first movie. My first movie was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In fact, I started my career in comedy, and was always auditioning for dramatic roles as well, but constantly told that I was just too funny. I was too half-hour. I wasn't dramatic enough, which is also really, I think, interesting. The next Karate Kid was obviously a very big break for me and a wonderful opportunity. I was a huge fan of The Karate Kid, the first one. I was a kid when I saw that and thought how wonderful to be a part of this. Not really much else to say about it other than I was really happy. There's criticism everywhere, and not all of it's constructive. So you walk a fine line of trying to figure out what is healthy and what's not. If someone says, your lips are too big, which I've heard, was that constructive? Is there anything I can do about that? No. If someone says, we feel you're too half-hour, that's great that that's their opinion, and that's why I didn't get that job, but I'm not going to take that upon myself and say, okay, well, then I'm just going to do comedy, and I'm only going to go in for comedy. So it's a fine line of figuring out what do you take in and have to help you grow. It's a business too. You can't close off and become bitter at things that people say, even though you might not always want to hear it. So, I would take some of the things in and incorporate that into to my craft or to my auditioning or to whatever it may be. And then other things I'd have to really say, oh, that really stings. That's a real bummer to hear that. That's not, but not allowed to close me up, to continue to stay open and say, but that's their opinion. I have had people in my life say, when are you going to give up your hobby and get a real job? There's certainly many, many people who have their own ideas about how life should be and aren't proponents for people following, maybe a dream that seems difficult to achieve, or what's the point? An actor, how is that? You're not a brain surgeon and, doesn't seem like an important job or whatever it may be. Finding and continuing to learn what to take in and what not to take in. At the same time, not becoming bitter or angry or hardened is very difficult. And it's something that still is a challenge for me. Yes, I've had wonderful success in my life. And when I'm invited to do things like this, it's just a constant reminder that I'm living my dream. But that does not mean that it doesn't come with a lot of challenges still. I will tell you that after I won my first Academy Award, I thought, wow, everything's going to change. I am going to get so many offers. I'm not even going to have time to read everything. And I'm going to get all these opportunities to work with people who inspire me and finally, get real quality material. Yes, that was partly the case. But what I realized was my first role was a role in where people saw me as looking like a boy. So that was their first impression of me. Well, of course, that's not who I am. I had long hair and I'm a girl before I got the role. But I realized that role being everyone's first impression, that I had a lot to prove. I still had a lot to prove. They didn't see me as the girl next door or the funny girl or the pretty girl. And that I understand. And I didn't become angry about it. I said, wow, well, now my job is to continue to go in, to meet people, to read things, to fight for things, to prove that I'm not just that, then I can be so much more. It's a constant job. It's not easy for me. Even after $1 Million Baby, there are still people who say, well, I don't really see her in this role. And I have to go in and I have to persuade them and talk to them and tell them why I am. That's not all of the time. Of course, I get wonderful opportunities, but I think when people look at successful people, they think we have everything. But it's really important. And I wish it was something that I was really told when I was younger, that it's always a work in progress, and that you have a choice every day in how you want to live your life. And I can wake up and rest on my laurels and say, oh, I have achievement, and now I'm just going to travel the world or whatever. That's a choice. But my choice is to continue to do what I love. I love what I do, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it. So I wake up in the morning and I say, what can I do today to continue to live my dream? Is it taking a class? Is it traveling? Is it taking a break so that I don't burn out? Is it going in and fighting for the script that I believe in, that they don't see me as? Is it learning more about the business side of it so that I understand why they make the choices that they do? There's always something to learn every single day. One of the things that I always remember my mother saying is, Hilary, stop staring. And I remember at a really young age, around 6, watching people to the extent of how they pick up their hamburger and how many times they chew, and little quirks that, like in their head, or how they would communicate with the person they're with or not communicate, how they touched their child on the head, or just taking everything in. It was just something that was very interesting to me. Human behavior is very interesting to me. And to this day, I continue to observe. And I think that what can happen when people become famous is they really lose touch with people because you become very insular. And there are reasons for that. There are reasons why you need security at times, and all of that is valid. But it also keeps you from being in touch with what you're trying to do with your craft. And I find that sometimes you can watch movies and you actually see a celebrity instead of an actor. And I just didn't want that to happen. I really didn't want to lose touch with my life as well. I didn't become an actor to become a celebrity. I became an actor, like I told you, to continue to learn about the human experience and about myself. And so I wasn't about to lose touch with that. And I moved to New York after the success of Boys Don't Cry, because I felt it was a cultural blunder. That's kind of how I describe it. There's lots of, you're in it together. And riding the subway was my choice of transportation. Freedom Riders was one of those movies that you read, and I didn't know that this was a true story. I'd never read about it. I didn't know anything about it. And it was a reminder that the power of someone who can believe in you, the one person, all you need is one person who can believe in you, and how that can change your life. How I had that one person, and how grateful I am for that one person, and how important it is to have that person. And if you don't have it, to be your own advocate and to believe in yourself. I know that's hard, and to dig that up somewhere when you've had people your whole life say, you can't, you're not worth it. You're never going to amount to anything, which is what these kids had experienced. They had been literally thrown into the trash and told they can't learn, they're never going to amount to anything. These are people living in the world today. They were told that because of the color of their skin, because of the amount of money that their parents had in their bank account, because they didn't have parents and they were getting into a lot of trouble. It's just a reminder to not judge a book by its cover, to not judge a person by the way they look, how they dress, how they may talk, that they are maybe troublemakers, but that they are a person who has a dream, who deserves just as much as the next person in life. And to see every single one of these kids who had been given up on completely, who had turned, of course, to the gang life. Why wouldn't you if you've been treated that way? They found a place where they belonged. Of course they're going to go there. To see every single one of them graduate from high school when they were the first of many of them, the first of their family to have graduated. They're heroes in my mind, and that they're going out in the world today and talking about their experience and inspiring other kids who are in their same shoes to look within and to fight for themselves and to not become bitter about it. Don't become angry about it. Just have compassion for the people who look down upon you because they don't know any better. Another moving opportunity for me to learn more about life and to feel connected. I don't know if it is more challenging being in the spotlight. I think it's just a difficult thing in itself of balancing your career and your life and a family, and it's a challenge, and I think it's a challenge even more now because more women than ever, I think, are pursuing their dreams and wanting to see their careers realized, and therefore putting family on hold for a little while. And a lot of people haven't done that before us, so we're kind of leading that, and we have to look to each other and be a support for each other during that as we find our way to find that balance. And it is a balance. It's difficult. It's difficult to be given an opportunity when you've said, I'm going to take this time off and devote it to seeing my mom again, and my grandfather in Iowa, who's been such a believer in me, whose health is failing, and to say, do I take this movie or do I go and be with my grandfather? Do I take this time? Because it's not just the time of filming the movie, it's the preparation, and then it's the travel afterwards of the press that takes 3 months of your life. And it's grueling. You travel the world it's wonderful, but it's also grueling. And finding that balance is a daily job of saying, today do I wake up and make the choice to do this movie knowing what that involves, or do I choose to take this time with my family and my friends because that's just as important part of my life as my career. I think it's something that you have to continue to ask yourself what's right for you, what's important to you, to make that list of priorities and make sure that you stick to them. And there will be things that I'll be asked to do, and I have to say, okay, if I choose to do that, it's going to take me away from my top 4 priorities. Is this worth it? And I have to kind of evaluate it like that. It's a give and take. So if I want to take away from my top 4 or whatever priorities, I have to see where I can balance that. And that's the only way I can balance it, because it's very easy to get a phone call and say, you've been asked to do this, that, or the other. And at that point to say, yeah, okay. And then afterwards go, oh, wow, but that's going to affect all of these other things. Okay, I can do that here, but then I can't do this other thing, in order to balance it all out to what's important to me. I feel like I've been blessed, and I don't ever want to take it for granted. And if I can somehow say something that affects that one person, and I want to do that. I want to be there.